Hey guys, welcome to Edenic Roundtable. Today we're talking all things digital and digital adoption. Guest on the show today is Mark Modena, Project Director at Winning Moves.
Hello.
Jamie Del Grosso, partner at Edenic Group and also owner of creative consultancy Gravitas Studio.
Hi guys.
Rob Lewis from Edenic Group and also founder of 54 Degrees, digital health startup.
Hi Wayne.
And to Colin Bell, Business Growth Director at the Northeast Local Enterprise Partnership.
Hello.
And also consultant at Winning Moves as well.
Indeed.
You should drop all of those things in. So just before we get into it, well, as I say, we're going to talk all things digital and the importance of digital, particularly in business. But Mark, why don't you give us just a little bit of background on Winning Moves and what you guys are about and why you're set up and how you're trying to help businesses with this challenge?
Yeah, that'd be great. So, Winning Moves has been supporting businesses since 1996. We've really been sort of pretty heavily involved with digital for many years. We've been delivering software since about 1998, and have supported businesses with growth, productivity, and so on over the years, a variety of different ways. I think how we've got to this point is our offer, I think, has come together where we've supported businesses and the digital side where we're working with organisations to, particularly SMEs, to help them to adopt digital better, to improve their business, make them more productive, and help them to grow.
Yeah. I mean, the digital, it's almost a surreal topic that we're having now because it's like part of our everyday lives, which we'll get onto. But the need for businesses to be embracing this is just become... I mean, it's just paramount, isn't it, really? And it's kind of partly what you guys are all about, which is trying to get everybody on board with this topic that, it's not some like pie in the sky magical thing. I mean, it really is just everyday life right now.
Yeah, totally agree. And if you look at it, I think most individuals, businesses are made up of individuals, and at the end, they're using technology heavily within their everyday lives. So it shouldn't be such a big leap really for businesses to take it on. I mean, we're working with all levels of maturity, really. Those that are really not doing much at all at the moment, and I guess at that point, you're wondering where to start. What are the things to adopt? And it can seem like a bit of a minefield out there, I guess, in terms of all the different options, right through to businesses that perhaps have grasped the nettle, if that's the right expression. Probably it's not the right expression.
Stump themselves.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Well, and that's it. And I'm sure they would have done it along the way.
Fear, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe that sort of prevented them pushing on and adopting other technologies. I think at the end of the day, it's not about technology for the sake of it, but it's finding technologies that really can help, and will make a difference to the organisation. I think that's where I think help and assistance can be really invaluable to them.
Yeah. Was there a switch point, do you think? Like, was there a time, I mean, sort of digital, we keep using the buzzword digital, if you like, but the internet has been around, 15 years, longer? Where are we at? But really, the last decade has been massive growth, really, in the whole kind of digital, utilisation of digital. Was there like a switch point where, do any of you guys remember a point where you went, okay, we were kind of in that era now, we really have to be adopting that? Was there a point? Was there a catalyst?
I think,
with
business. So I started my first business when I was fairly young, and it was kind of just me and a friend on our own. We didn't really have, the resources or the money that a lot of people had. So I couldn't hire an accountant. I didn't have that kind of setup. So it was kind of the tools that we use for automation that I found are really helpful for me as a business to get started. There's a huge amount of account software out there and things like that. And just being able to automate those processes. So I was working on the business, not in the business, and actually trying to work on pushing it forward. I think that's the kind of tools that I kind of spotted straight away. And I was like, this is really helping me grow what I do. And this is making my life a lot easier. I think there's always been kind of technology being used in business. But when people started realizing they can just automate a whole amount of their business and they can run a whole business from their back bedroom, I think that was the point where people started to say, okay, this is this is a really big thing we should be embracing.
I think that's really true. If you look at it, I think things like Sage software, accounting software has been used for many years. But the last few years, you've had something like Xero, which not only can you use technology, but you can actually do it more efficiently. Whereas I think previously it just helped you to do things in a slightly better and more organised way. But this actually, adds the efficiencies as well.
And other account softwares are available.
Sorry, Jerry.
No promo.
Your question around when did business wake up to this? I think it was when they started to realise that all these companies were making shitloads of money out of it. Yeah. So if you're a traditional company making loads of money from what you did traditionally, then you see the growth of Apple, you see the growth of Facebook, which ostensibly is just software. That's when people realise that you can make a lot of money from it. And I think that was not the tipping point as such or a switch going off, but people just started to wake up to it. You see pretty much every large corporation now will have a digital strategy, and that's the reason, because they've realised it's a smart way to make cash.
Yeah. I think the interesting as well is like the businesses, like we've mentioned this in a few kind of workshops that we do, the businesses that are at the top of like all these kind of indexes and things are the ones that don't actually have a tangible asset that they're selling, or a lot of them don't. They are digital-based companies, and they have sort of some of the highest values in terms of business that exist at the moment.
Absolutely, I think around that the kind of tipping point on when was that? I think where I really noticed it's when we moved from almost dial-up into proper broadband, when broadband was reliable and, absolutely, yeah. They do look quite fondly back to the floppy disk and the kind of dial-up and things.
I remember when broadband came about, and I remember being at my friend's house and he asked me to Google something, and Google was about then, and he asked me to Google something, and for the life of me, I couldn't think of anything to Google, because you're on the spot, so Google anything, and I'm like, because he just wanted to demonstrate the speed of which you could find that search. Now, of course, we take it for granted, and the young millennials will have no idea, I guess. So millennials, what are they? Generation Z, whatever it is we're in now.
Yeah.
But I just remember that moment. Yeah. So the broadband switch.
Of course, and it was asking Jeeves as well, wasn't it? Back in the day. God, yeah. But I think that's where businesses almost became a bit of a utility. If broadband was switched off, if it didn't work, it actually caused a problem in the way your business was running or your daily lives. I think that's where we're probably in quite an exciting moment at the moment, because that infrastructure, without that's the real enabler. The more quicker, the more capacity in the infrastructure, the more ability we've got to be online in different places, and it is something that I do think will present a tipping point. So as we move to 5G, faster broadband. I mean, here we are in Hull today. You've got your own infrastructure within the area and all the capabilities that brings. I think that's where we're probably on the cusp of another tipping point. A whole new era of connectivity and capability around the web.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think hardware as well. I mean, if you look at, I was looking at there's a new series of portable hard drives that are coming out, and they're the size of a key, they're these tiny things, and they're 1 to 10 terabytes. I remember when I was getting sort of my first sort of MP3 players and like these massive things, and they were about 100 meg or something, and it was like, wow, that's amazing how much memory they can fit into this thing. Yeah. And now that's if you had a hard drive that was 100 meg and this big, it'd be unthinkable. You'd be like, what is this? So everything's moving so quickly and becoming so portable and easy to use.
Cloud storage, isn't it? We I was remembering a little bit earlier today, we at one point, we've obviously been doing software for a long time, we had a server room in the office with 18 servers, one for each system we had. Now, it probably wasn't even that efficient then, to be fair, but also I think what you asked, Wayne, about the tipping point, that point where you move over and you're using that cloud storage and the facilities through likes of DigitalOcean and Amazon Web Services and so on, that is a massive change, really.
I suppose, I kind of felt it really in personal life as well. I suppose when you get your first smartphone was a pretty significant tipping point, when you could actually start seeing visual things on your screen. And this was the day after like the Nokia 3310 or whatever, and you was playing Snake on it and stuff like that. And then actually you could like see, moving image and screen and TV. I mean, what we can do with it now is obviously...
It's amazing. Well, it's not that long ago as well. Yeah. Like I remember getting one of the first, color screen phones, and it was like one of the old Sony Ericsson phones, and they say it was a colour screen phone. Like some of the pixels weren't black. It was a pretty basic. You couldn't tell what was going on. And then if you look nowadays at like the devices we've got and what's capable, and this is only, probably probably 10 years or so in terms of a difference. We're moving ahead massively in terms of digital development and actually what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's important is that we identify what we mean, because we keep saying this term digital. So in terms of a business, what are we saying? When we say digital, what does that mean to me, Joe Bloggs, business owner, manufacturer? What are we talking about? If you was to define it, could you put it into a sentence? Mark?
No pressure.
That one you said earlier on.
Can I take over the questions?
I'll have a go at that one way. Foolishly.
I haven't got it written down.
I mean, literally by definition, it means using digital technology, but that can be to improve the offer you give to your customers. It can be about using data and understanding them more. It can be obviously about the efficiency, how you run your lines, how you make orders, etc., how you do your accounting. But for me, I think Mark made a really interesting point earlier about digital, which is about when you use it. But for this program particularly, everything doesn't have to be digital, and often it doesn't make sense to make things digital for the sake of it. But any company would be foolish not to look at the opportunity of how you can use digital technology, especially with what Jamie was saying with the improvements in technology and how it becomes more and more integrated into your life. It's just going to be natural that people use it in every aspect of the way they deliver, run, the products they offer, the services they offer. It's going to be everything.
Totally agree. There's a point Colin's made several times, but to me in the past is you can't think of many high growth businesses that don't use digital. You just can't. There is. If you want to be in that place, you've got to use it effectively.
Well, I would go as far as to say that it's impossible to scale a business without being effective at adopting digital technology.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a quote outside. I think it's in the office building that we're in somewhere on the wall that says every business is a digital business. They just don't all know it yet. And I think that's really true. I mean, even if I still sometimes come across people that say like they don't want to be online, they don't want to do this kind of thing. But whether they want to or not, their customers are. The general consumer is using the internet and is using online
new
tools.
staff and stuff as well.
Whether you want to or not, you are an online business. You are online. You are a digital business. Whether you choose to embrace that and control it yourself or kind of back away from it, that's up to you, but you are a digital business.
Yeah. I mean, Colin, you said scale up, but I mean, not to put the fear out there, but I mean, there's an element of survival really as well, isn't there, would you say, for the business community? If you're like dead set against embracing the technology that's out there, even for basic functions of your business, then you're going to be in danger probably.
Well, project 3 years forward. I mean, the reality is you won't be able to operate. You won't be able to do your banking. You won't be able to, manage your accounts. That's all moving digital. Customers are going to, if you're a retail outlet, customers are going to come in. They're not going to have cash anymore. They're going to, be wanting to pay by card and increasingly by digital means on the phone, etc. So, the reality is that it will become, in the not too distant future, absolutely impossible to operate a business without adopting digital technology.
Yeah.
If you think as well about some of the businesses Winnie Moose has helped over or supported over the years, a lot of them have become better and better and better at what they've done, but pretty much done the same stuff. So they've got better at maintaining the status quo, right up to the point where, particularly things like manufacturing, automotive and that sort of, they've got better and better at what they've done until that thing was no longer needed, and they'd nothing to follow up. They hadn't looked at innovation in terms of what are they going to do next, what else could they do, and digital technology can help them to do that.
Yeah, and I think if the businesses themselves don't embrace it, someone else within their field will. And we talk about disruption a lot. And you could have a business that's been selling the same products for a long time. If someone else comes along selling a similar product, but they're embracing of these new technologies and they're providing the same thing but quicker, more efficiently, then there's a good chance that they'll disrupt that business that's always been there.
I think manufacturing's a really good example because most manufacturing supply chains, there's cost down pressure. So every year you're probably through a supply chain you'll be mandated to deliver a 6% cost reduction. Now that's when all your costs are going up, and that's year on year. Every year you have to deliver that cost reduction. How else are you going to do that without effectively adopting digital technology to really drive process efficiency? So it's an absolute necessity.
I think especially if you're consumer facing, I mean, we talk about how people use technology in their everyday lives, But, and if I've ever gone into a shop or a bar or something and they say, oh, sorry, we don't have a card machine or they can't use contactless, I have never felt so put out in my entire life. I'm just I've got to take a card out of my wallet. I can't just touch my phone to it. Or
well, it's funny. We did a podcast the other day, and we was on a podcast with we did one with Barclays, and we was talking about the digital eagles and the Eagle Labs and the whole thing that was talking about that. And one of their chaps was saying that even like his local fish and chip shop now is like a contactless payment kind of thing. And it used to be not so long ago, I think you was looked at strange when you went into a shop and like you got your phone out to like pay for things. Now you looked at strange if you go into the shop with a cash. It's almost reversed. Yeah. And actually, the touching upon businesses becoming cashless as well, which is really the banking sector is particularly noticing. That more and more that cash is not king anymore. It is digital transactions.
People asking for cash it's a problem. My window cleaner is the only person who I pay by cash. And to be honest,
he could have a chip in.
Is that why you owe him 6 months?
The windows are no longer clean.
Absolutely. Yeah. But mind you, when I say to him, can I not just have your bank details? I'll just wire it. And he looks at me in fear. He'll be thinking, well, I might have to declare that.
I think the other side of that whole digital payment thing is really interesting as well. There's companies who facilitate that and make loads of money out of every single transaction. Yeah. So if you use Apple Pay, Apple are not just providing that as a service to make your life easier, they're making loads of money out of it. And that is money for doing nothing. That's pretty cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I suppose behind every digital movement, there's somebody making money, right? So I mean, that's basically it. So even if you wanted to be looking as a business owner, if you wanted to be looking at this in terms of not only function, but you could be looking at it as opportunity to innovate, to grow, to go into new territories, to offer new services. I mean, it's endless, isn't it?
It is. And I think, those opportunities include some of the things that are spoken about less, like cybersecurity. The big topic, covered a lot and what have you. But I can't think of too many businesses who'd be happy to hold their hand up and say, actually, we've either been stung by some sort of cyber fraud, or we managed to prevent it or whatever. But I think there's a hell of a lot of that going on, which I think probably need to be more open about to help resolve it.
Yeah. I think you touched upon earlier on, Colin. I think you said about the rate of change as well, and like it happens so quickly, hasn't it? I mean, really, if you just went back 10 years and think what was the infrastructure like even a decade ago, 15 years ago, if you can clearly remember back to not even having the smartphone and things like that it's moved so very quickly, hasn't it? And Jamie, I've got a stat up here about Jamie, I'll let you explain it, but there was this thing from Emerging Future which was really interesting about the pace of change and what we expect it to be moving forward.
Yeah, so I mean, this was Emerging Future, essentially a website that looks at digital integration of lives and kind of where they think it's going to go in the future. And they did some research and they found that over a 5-year period, we were going to be 32 times more efficient in digital technology, or have 32 times more capabilities than we do now. But when they kind of looked at that further in the future, so when they looked at 10 years' time, that it was over 1 million times more with more capabilities, because as we're developing new technologies, those technologies help us essentially create the next sort of line of technology and sort of aid us in our progression.
And I think going back to that theme around infrastructure being a driver, one of the things I think that's really going to accelerate accelerate that rate of change is going to be things like smart cities, the way infrastructure operates. We're going to have connected autonomous vehicles. That's going to drive huge amounts of change. So basically the way we live our lives, the way our infrastructure is controlled and supported, the way services on a municipal level are organised, that will all be digitally driven. And I think that's when things really, we're going to see a real transformation, I believe, in the next 5 years in the way we live our lives.
It has to happen as well, doesn't it? I was watching over the weekend, there's a Chris Packman documentary about, it was just basically covering what's the impact of having 7.7 billion people on the globe, and it's obviously gone to various different places, and some of it's quite scary, really, But if we're going to go to 10 billion by 2050, you can't that isn't going to work unless we just do things very, very differently.
No, we're doing a project in this region around decarbonisation and kind of with ideas to save the use of carbon. And one of those is converting people from doing things physically to doing it digitally. Obviously, digital has a footprint because data resides in data centres which generate heat and has to be kept cool. But fundamentally, not driving your car to the doctor's surgery is saving quite a lot of carbon, and that can be done on your webcam.
Yeah, and literally, and that sort of thing, that kind of software as a service or other similar ideas, a great way for cost saving for the business as a whole, because you're talking personnel that could maybe be doing something different, infrastructure changes, energy use. I mean, it just goes on, the list goes on. So, I mean, unfortunately, businesses are going to have to get a grip with this, aren't they? Because, I mean, in terms of, there's a lot of talk around green and decarbonisation, and that's all going to involve some form of digital replacement in some way. Like if we do the thing with the government at the moment where they're talking about taking petrol engines off the road, essentially, was it 2032 they've brought it to now? So I mean that's going to change, right? So like how the vehicles you're driving, how you're charging them, how you're transporting people around. I mean, it's just something we're going to have to accept as a business. If you're not on board with this,
I think what's interesting as well is like we're talking about the businesses, but if we look at consumers, you made a really good point about like the infrastructure and the connectivity. Right now, there's a lot of projects underway that are looking at increasing the amount of people that are on the internet, because there's still a lot of people out there that don't have access to the internet. So there's, I think Tesla are working on something, Facebook are working on something, Google are, to essentially create this blanket Wi-Fi that gives all these different countries access to the internet. So that's a huge amount of additional consumers that will become available on that market. So it's a really good time for businesses to start looking at this and getting their presence online sorted while all these consumers are about to appear.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can accept, we've certainly covered the fact that businesses should be embracing digital technology. I mean, I think it's a given. And I think just saying it in your own personal lives, if you just look at an hour of your day of what you're doing, the likelihood is you're interacting with some form of digital link in some way. It's either your phone, you're on your computer, you're on an iPad.
And if you can't connect, you go into meltdown.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you've lost your arm, lost a limb or something, isn't it? So, I mean, like, if it's like that in your everyday life, then you are also a consumer, you are also a purchaser of business. The business has to be on board with that. So I think we accept that. So, I mean, one of the key questions, I guess, is, are we lagging far behind? Is business lagging far behind? And if so, why? Why is there such a delayed uptake on it, do you think?
I think, I mean, you get the full range, don't you? Those that really, really sort of embraced it, and actually they are truly digital businesses, and that's how they operate it. I guess there's a lot of barriers though to adoption. Whether that's having had a bad experience previously, not knowing where to start, fear of getting it wrong. Perhaps the leadership and the management in an organisation, if they've done things a certain way, perhaps people don't like change, do they? Really, underlyingly, but there is a certain fear factor. There's probably other things as well, but I think there are those basic barriers to adoption, if you like, that that need to be overcome before businesses really move forward with that.
I mean, it's like nobody wants to knock the status quo, do they? That's the thing. I suppose as a business owner, you're concerned about changing what you've done, and there's that old line that if you think the way you've always think, you'll do what you've always done, kind of thing. But I guess that's a real concern, isn't it? If we move to a different account system, or we start automating this or whatever, this is going to disrupt my business, and I'm not going to be able to continue making money.
I think basically. I mean, this is like the classic thing, isn't it? I mean, look at all the shops that have closed because of online retail. But nobody can turn around and say we didn't think this was going to happen, because that's the minute the internet came on, the first thing they said it's going to change the way we buy stuff. So we've known that since 1990, whenever it was. And so they just haven't figured out how to do it because they've clung on to what they do. I think the other really interesting area is professions. So in the UK, there's an app called Babylon, which is basically a way to interact with a GP. So Matt Hancock is banging on about this because if you use that, you're paying for your own healthcare, basically, which takes the cost out of the NHS, which arguably is a bad thing or a good thing, depending on your perspective. But fundamentally, you can have an appointment with your GP via technology on your phone. Now, you could argue that for certain things you need a physical relationship, but for pretty much most things you don't need that. But when that company published a study in the British Medical Journal a couple of years ago, the doctors went mental about it because they argued that actually you can't give the same kind of care digitally as you can with a face-to-face meeting. But actually they were proven to be wrong. It was shown to be more accurate using their AI. But obviously those doctors have spent a lot of money and time invested in their education. It's a very respected profession. So it's these kind of guys who need to work out how to use digital, in my opinion.
And it's coming, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's that. And that exact conundrum is going to face so many professions, isn't it? And I was reading something last week essentially saying that in the legal sector, around about 100,000 jobs are going to be displaced over the next 3 or 4 years, because of AI, that's going to start performing those tasks. So the economy is almost moving from, quite a labour-intensive system into more of a capital-intensive system. So we're going to see this kind of huge amount of change. Again, there's been lots in the press lately about personal trainers, being kind of replaced by AI applications that are actually as effective, if not more effective, in kind of getting results for people.
I think AI in particular seems to create like a lot of fear with people. So, it was when we started seeing things come out where they were automating jobs and things, there was a lot of fear of, am I going to lose my job? Am I going to be replaced by a machine? It's something that I always call like the Terminator complex, where people sort of see, shops are a great example. You go in now and pretty much every shop has a self-checkout, and people are always like, well, that's taking jobs away from people that would be working on the checkout and that kind of thing. So I think sometimes there is a bit of a fear of, if I adopt this, am I essentially taking away jobs from people in certain industries?
I think Rob's point earlier was, really strong around that. Actually, going back to 1998, 97, we knew that the internet was going to drive different behaviours in shopping. People didn't react to that. Then they go out of business. And I think it's essential that people, adopt technology, they make that change. But the reality is that I think a point you made, Mark, that the vast majority of people don't want to change. In fact, research backs that up. The Enterprise Research Centre, some of the research they've looked at basically says that around about 80% of businesses just want to continue doing what they did last year. Just continue. Absolutely. They fundamentally don't want to change. In fact, just another, whilst I'm on stats, being stato, another stat is that companies, that 75% of companies who have previously adopted technology are less likely to do so in the future because they've screwed it up, so...
Yeah, that's... I mean, I've seen that a lot as well. I mean, people looking for sort of a certain tool, and if they don't get it right the first time, then it's this kind of blanket thing of, okay, that doesn't work for my business, rather than looking for something that is maybe more fit to them and works for them. It's kind of it doesn't work for me, I don't like it.
I mean, I think for businesses and leadership teams, it really is very much an adopt and adapt rather than a replace, isn't it? And that sort of element of reassurance needs to be put in. Your staff, for example, if you're hiring people to do X amount of jobs, perhaps they could be using their time and skill set to be doing something more productive for your business rather than, in some cases, like administering tasks. So if you take an account software, for example, you could have somebody putting in numbers into an Excel sheet, or you could have like an automated piece of software that's kind of configuring this for you. And actually, your finance person can be more focused on, new opportunities and how best to use your money or an investment or whatever. They can be repositioned in what they're doing for the business. Rather, it's not really a case of replacing, is it?
We've seen that firsthand. At one point, we probably peaked, I think, at about 4 account staff, and that's not that long ago. Whereas now it is a part-time job because the software does a lot. For sure, there's more time spent perhaps in terms of actually managing the numbers, so actually looking at what does it mean and interpreting it and for your business, which is, I suppose, what you want to be doing with it, rather than, as you say, just keying data in isn't really very value added.
Yeah, and Matt, you touched upon it earlier on as well. With people that are coming into jobs now, there's an element of expectation, isn't there? So I mean, if you're going for a job now, a minimal amount of digital investment in that business is expected to be there, isn't it? If you're going into that, they're not going to want an Excel sheet and or whatever. They're going to want it to be automated, and that's what they would, because they've grown up with that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think there's sort of two ways of looking at it. I mean, I think people going into jobs now, they exactly said they do want that digital technology because, like I said earlier, it allows them to work on the job they're doing, on the business rather than in the business. So rather than punching in numbers, they can look at, is this the most efficient way of doing it? Is there something I can do to improve my job or what I'm doing? And I think the other way to look at it is, especially when we're talking about AI and automation, I don't think there'll ever be a point where we can do that without some sort of human intervention or human integration with it. AI only really works in a best case scenario. So if there's something where it doesn't quite follow that preset pattern, then it's not going to work. So there does need to be someone there to manage that, to monitor that, to be involved in that process.
It's interesting. I think you must have made a really good point there, because it all lit up behind us. I'm looking forward to that happening at some point, maybe.
Broadcast Rob's emails to the world. How much was that? How much did you say?
I think they're 90% work. Well, we just got an order.
Yeah, exactly.
I was quite impressed.
See, this is what digital technology does. You see,
it's very distracting.
It's very disruptive. It gets in the middle of stuff.
Yeah.
We won't edit this. We'll just let it go.
Well, it depends what's on there.
Depends what's coming up.
Who is Saucy Sue?
Yeah.
I can't believe you can see that man from there.
Oh, it's in the back of my head.
Right, okay, moving on to it.
But it kind of like makes the point, human intervention. There you go.
Yeah. You still need somebody to take it off the screen, that's right.
Yeah. The only thing I was going to say, just education's interesting though, isn't it? Because, I've got teenage kids at school, and it doesn't seem like education's really caught up almost. They're still learning in a very similar way to, they've got computers and what have you, but they're learning in a really similar way. They're still using PowerPoint and Excel, and
it's not even how you learn; it's what you learn as well, isn't it? I mean, let's face it. I've got 2 degrees and a science background. I never ever use that information unless I'm doing it subliminally. So when kids doing their options, what do you tell them? I mean, the job you're going to do when you leave school is not going to be the job that exists today.
Yeah,
so.
that's right.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, things are, like we said earlier, are moving so quickly that what people are learning right now, by the time they get into those roles, may be obsolete or adapted in a way that is completely different. And
the business is going to have to adapt for that as well. I mean, again, adopting digital is just part and parcel of this, because you're right, the kids that are studying now they don't even know what job they're going to be in, because it's going to be different. It already is, so the education system is a little redundant as it is now, because it's kind of a tiered, study this, then go to here, and life's changed a little bit, and now anyone can pretty much do anything, so that's for future businesses, for incumbent businesses and future businesses, they're going to have to be ready to embrace that, because they're going to have to be agile and shift in what they do.
And I think that comes down to people as well. We're going to be in a situation where there's probably going to be a lot of people who need retrained, and so it's almost, just almost accepting, throughout my career, throughout my life, I'm going to have to be in a constant state of adaptation, change, learning, and it's just part of the parcel. But that then comes down, that's a skill in itself, isn't it?
I think there's a bit of a paradox to it though, because I mean, you will have people that, if you look at education and they're learning a particular job role, for instance, yes, by the time they finish that, the skills they've learned or the tools they're using may have changed. But for most people in education and in that age range, in their everyday life, they're adapting to new technologies every day, and they're learning how to learn new things and how to learn new systems. So I think there's like both sides of it. Like they may not be ready for the job role in terms of the tools that they're using, but hopefully those people will be quite good at adapting to new technologies and learning new things.
Massive challenge for the training and learning providers, though, as well, isn't it? Because I think for years we've talked about them being more demand-driven. So give the training for what's actually needed, but we're still in this era of sort of 1, 2, 3, 4 year courses for stuff that, as you rightly say, James, a great point. It might be out of date by the time they get to use it. So actually, it needs to be much more bite-sized chunks of what's actually needed to do the job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, within a business as well, especially a larger business, you've got people of different ages and different generations. And because, the technology that we're talking about now, as we said earlier, has kind of come about fairly quickly. So within a business, you could have people that have got completely different sort of levels of knowledge or interaction with technology. As we get further in the future, hopefully, we'll see people where all of them have grown up with constantly changing technology. But I mean, I saw something the other day on the internet where someone was holding a floppy disk and said, "Look what I found," and someone had commented saying, "Oh, look, you 3D printed the save icon." And they didn't realise that it was, so I mean, we've got such a huge difference. Just in, if you take one average corporate-sized business, you've got huge amounts of knowledge gaps between one person and another person when they're talking about digital.
And there's a lot to be said for experience as well, isn't there? So I mean, if you go to manufacturing, is a good example. It's certainly an industry that I feel struggles to get around the idea of change and digital. They're very much set in a way of doing things, and this is the process, and this is how we make things, whatever. So they're a harder nut to crack, so to speak, I think. But there's a lot to be said for the people that have worked there for 20 or 30 years. Their experience is invaluable, isn't it? Really, when we're talking about digital, we're talking about adopting it and embracing it to enhance what you're doing, not completely transform or change what you're doing. It's not like we're saying turn off your business and do something else. We're saying use it to make your life easier and push forward. Yeah,
basically at level, it's about staying relevant and competitive, it isn't it? And particularly in manufacturing, I mean, it is hard to change quite often. If you're in a supply chain that's demanding X amount of parts in regular intervals throughout a day or throughout a week, actually to stop what you're doing, to kind of change things, to experiment can be a real challenge. But there is a necessity to do that. However, so that's something that the sector's got.
Yeah, I mean, when we do workshops, people in various industries talking about this, and one of the things that we always end up talking about is how do you develop that kind of innovation culture where people are embracing of that new changes, and that's not just the people at the top, that's everyone that's working within that company. And how do you get them to embrace it and see it as a positive and progressive thing rather than something to be afraid of?
And I think that's a key thing, and for me it all comes down to mindset, and that could be in individuals who are looking at learning their careers or people who are running a business. Because I spend quite a bit of time really exploring what's behind scale up, levels of performance in business, and to boil that down into three broad areas. What really differentiates a scale up to any other businesses that tend to be more innovative. They're doing something differently, really in its broadest sense. They tend to be more likely to export. Interestingly, exporters are more likely to innovate, and innovators are more likely to export, and they are all more likely to be effective at adopting digital technology. So there's three things, but it's not those acts in themselves; it's the mindset that's driving those. Why are those companies or those leaders actually more receptive to those things than other people? And I think that's what's interesting. It's people really honing in on identifying what matters. What's going to deliver scale, deliver opportunity, deliver success in my business or my career, and then really honing in on those things. So for me, that's something that's really of real interest. How do we really hone in, distill what that mindset's like, and try and spread and infect more people with it?
Yeah, I mean, if the leadership are not embracing of it, then it's just never going to happen, is it? I mean, and that's the thing. I suppose that's a message to business owners and business leaders now. As talking about digital, you really need to be embracing it. I mean, ultimately, there isn't really any argument for it. You probably already are involved in it, and already, if you're not embracing digital, you will already be finding barriers and struggles, and it's only going to get worse if you don't adapt to that. So you have to be open to a little bit of change and a little bit of development in changing what you've already done.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like we've mentioned a few times, it is going to happen anyway. I mean, the world is adapting in that way. Digital is becoming a bigger part of our lives. And I think it's really up to the individuals and the people within those businesses, how they see that. They can see it as a great tool for progression and use it to sort of push what they do further, or they can kind of shy away from it, and chances are it may be something that actually disrupts what they're doing, whether it's them doing it or someone else.
And I think there's an irony as well, because actually digital is an enabler of all those things. So actually it makes it easier to learn. If you're a manufacturer who needs to change the way their processes operate, and you can look at digital twins and all these sort of things. So actually quite often the solution is within digital as well.
It's nowhere to start as well, though, isn't it? That's I think one of the biggest. If you haven't done very much at all, if you're a sort of quite traditional manufacturer compared to businesses that are embracing this Industry 4.0 approach to digitally connected manufacturing, then it must seem like looking to the moon almost. So it is though almost creating that path, but you obviously need that agility as well because that might change. Yeah. The moon might move or...
Yeah, Mark, well, that makes a nice link, actually, to talking about what's coming up. Yeah, that was really good, yeah. Wasn't prepped. So Winning Moves are managing a digital catalyst program, which Edenic are very happy to be part of, but we've got some other consultants involved as well, which is all about tackling this challenge, particularly in the Humber region. So we're going to talk just a little bit about what this program's about, and I suppose it'll answer the question, where do I start?
Yeah, no, absolutely happy to do it. Yeah, I mean, so we're looking to work with businesses, as you say, in the area, working with SMEs, but a little bit more established, so they have been through some phase of growth. But it is doing just that, really, helping them to embrace digital technology, but linked very much to where they're going as a business. So what are their vision and aspirations, and how can digital technology in some shape or form that's relevant to them? So it's not about forcing different technologies on them, but working out what is relevant to them and actually helping them make a start, really. So what are you going to do with this?
Yeah, so there's an element of benchmarking, isn't there, which is a case of, okay, where are you at? What are you doing now? Essentially, that's basically what that's about. And then, as you say, what's your vision, and are you in best position to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So looking in what the level of digital maturity is. I think it's relevant to organisations that are at the start point, but those that are on the journey as well. But it's doing something dead practical as well. So getting in there and actually sort of working out, right, what opportunity are we going to try and take advantage of, or what problem we're going to try and solve here, and actually focusing on that and getting it to at least the sort of the outline of a solution, and then helping them find additional support or trusted local technology providers, of course, as well, that can help them take the journey. Because at the end, it's something that it's only going to happen if they embrace it and they drive it forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important starting point as well, because there's so many people that are out there that may think, I do actually want to embrace digital. I do want to incorporate this into my business model. But nowadays, I mean, there's so many options out there that it's such a noisy landscape. I speak to people all the time, and they say, well, we're having this problem. And I'll say, oh, well, there's this tool that will help you do that. And I didn't know that existed. I've looked for it, I couldn't find it. So I think sometimes, people, they maybe do want to embrace this kind of thing, but where do they look to find these tools? They didn't even know that exists and that they can actually get that kind of support from digital tools.
And I think that's one of the key elements of this particular Digital Catalyst program is to find, we're working with real experts that can really sort of help businesses get on the right path. It's important. And also that they're, completely neutral. So they're going in, their only aim with the whole intervention is to make a positive difference.
Yeah. And Colin, you play a role on the LEP. So are you finding that more and more sort of local government and authorities around that are really getting behind this sort of stuff? I mean, this is a LEP-backed initiative, is that right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So it's supported by the Humber Business Local Enterprise Partnership, and then delivered through the local growth hub.
Yeah, and so and that's important, really. I mean, so even as an authority, as an area, we're recognising that we have to be investing and looking at what our business communities do.
Absolutely. Just to clarify, I'm not at the Humber LEP, but
the
North East LEP.
Just a LEP.
But work with Winning Moves as well. I think in terms of the role of the public sector, and particularly industrial strategy, that's really focused on actually how do we drive up living standards, and a key way of doing that's actually by increasing productivity per worker. So actually, if we can increase the output per worker, the rationale is that people get paid more. That's reflected in their wage package, and living standards increase. So that's a real driver behind trying to increase levels of productivity. The issue there is that what Treasury have identified is what they call a long tail of companies who are really underperforming in terms of productivity, almost being a bit of a dragging anchor, to the UK and it's the kind of progress it's making. So at one end of the spectrum, we've got really productive companies, and the other end, we've got really poorly performing companies in terms of productivity performance. So the challenge is actually in terms of that vast majority of companies, how can we increase their productivity performance? And government have really identified digital technology and the adoption of digital tech as one of the means of doing that. Doesn't have to be huge levels of change in those organisations, but in fact, if they could all just raise their game at 1-2%, it would have a huge impact on the economy. So that's kind of part of the challenge we've got to contend with. How do we almost raise the performance of a lot of companies in parallel?
Yeah, I mean, because we're talking about individual businesses here, but obviously if, a lot of businesses within an area are improving the productivity and what they do, becoming more profitable, then that makes the area itself, a more attractive business destination for people. And hopefully that means that we can bring in, more businesses, or we can, create better connections with businesses throughout the country. So
yeah. Plus you see that with Humber as well, isn't it? There is a real advantage with some of the fibre broadband that's brought in, and that will over time attract other businesses. At the end, most parts of the country are playing catch up with London, really. Because that all roads seem to lead there. But opportunities like there is locally, there's a real potential there for businesses to take advantage of.
So there's real opportunity, isn't there? So I mean, for the Digital Capitalist Programme, so it's 60 businesses or around about 60 businesses.
A minimum of 60
businesses.
Yeah.
I mean, these are funded programs. These are for people, external experts, to come into your business, firstly benchmark and see where you're at, and then speak to you and figure out where you could be or where your aspiration is or what your vision is, and then work with you to come up with a plan to do this and adopt various elements of digital technology or upskilling or whatever area of digital. I mean, that's ultimately what the goal is, so that the business can grow. That's ultimately the point.
Absolutely right. Yeah. And it's at no cost to the business. And that's that hand-holding, if you like, to get them to get them started if need be, or to push them help them along the path. Say push them is probably the wrong expression, but help them along the path and almost accelerate that adoption.
And I think it's fair to say one thing that's really important to us, it's when we're working with a company, it's making a real difference. It's really, kind of boosting their performance in a specific area, helping them grow their revenues, helping them increase their productivity, become more profitable. So it's not, suppose what I'm trying to say there, it's not kind of pushing technology. It's not technology for technology's sake. It's genuinely making a difference.
And it's important to stress that, isn't it? And Rob, you mentioned it earlier on, but it's very much, it's not digital for the sake of being digital. We're not saying, build apps and invent things and put a robot in your office or whatever. I mean, maybe, but like that's not ultimately what we're saying. We're saying, look, there's a whole different world out there, and you certainly need to be part of it. Definitely need to be part of it on a minimal level to exist, but to grow and to prosper and to hire more and to make more money and all the rest of it, you need to be looking at what the future involves, and it's going to involve some form of digital.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key phrase isn't be digital, it's embrace digital. It's look at kind of what level of digital technology is right for you, how it works with your business, and how you can improve what you're doing. It doesn't mean just make everything digital and forget everything that you're currently doing. It's just, how can that elevate what you're already doing and what service you offer your clients.
Yeah.
It could range from, doing things more efficiently to improve productivity, as Colin referred to, and, that could be about picking up things like customer relationship management systems. It could be about doing your marketing more effectively, increasing your reach, or it could be about doing things much more innovatively. So, like the artificial intelligence, embracing that as we've discussed, but the various other technologies around Internet of Things, big data, analytics, and so on. So it really is a full range. Some more innovative, but some more about about doing things more efficiently.
And there's so many areas probably that you'll discover that you find that you probably have a really good link with that you would never think. We was talking the other day, Rob, about gaming, wasn't we, on the Barclays podcast, and we were saying that your kids are so immersed in like the online gaming now, particularly, and there's so many in-game purchases, and there's a whole business around there. I mean, that the industry itself is just worth far too many billions to count. But the link between gamification, for example, and what happens within a business, either with your staff or the way you sell or the products or any of that, is massive, isn't it? And there's links there that probably business leaders probably aren't spotting. and opportunities there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's looking at your own industry, but looking at the industries that are emerging around you, and gaming, for example, is a huge advertising opportunity. For businesses to embrace, or lots of other things. But I think maybe people are focusing too much on their own industry, and there is a lot of other things happening. There's a lot of things that are likely to change how we interact with digital in the future.
I always think about gaming. If you're going to have all these cars that are driving around by themselves, then what are you going to do in the car? You're probably going to. There's a whole industry for in-car entertainment, isn't it?
And to move forward. Rob, we talk a lot about innovation and we work with a lot of businesses on innovation. The embrace digital element, one of our 3Ds, that is, it's the vital part, isn't it? It's definitely a key component if you're going to innovate and prosper and grow moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about it earlier, but fundamentally, digital is what's changing every business. Everyone who's been disrupted is effectively being disrupted by someone who's done something digital. So, Kodak were disrupted by digital cameras. That is a huge example. Everyone needs to be thinking about it, because if you don't, you're at risk of that happening to you. Yeah. That's fundamentally what it boils down to.
Yeah, and be the disruptor.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's exactly it. It's be the disruptor or be disrupted. Essentially, and these, we won't go too deep into it, but these startups are coming along. All of these people, and they're coming up with new ways for eating, shopping, living, travel, working, everything, literally everything's coming along. And Rob, you touched upon it earlier on, but there are major brands that aren't with us anymore that were, part of our growing up, our upbringing. Like, you would never imagine that these places would disappear. And then, and it's very quick, it can happen. It doesn't matter how big you are, or how much money you're making. If you're not moving, you're in danger of.
Everyone talks about startups, and they're scared of startup coming on and eating up their business, basically. But in reality, all businesses, incumbent businesses, have a massive advantage. Yeah. They've been in that sector for decades, if not hundreds of years. They understand their consumer. They've got great brands, and they've got loads of money. So they're in a really great place to be able to use digital. I'm talking about big corporates there, but it applies at every level of business.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, like I say, when we talk about disruptors and people disrupting industries, people automatically think startups, but there's nothing saying that an incumbent business can't be the disruptor, can't change what they're doing, and adopt new technologies or adopt new innovations. So it's not kind of just you have to be a new company to look at this. Anyone can kind of.
Yeah, and I think what economists would say is that that's a process of creative disruption. You need the innovators, you need the disruptors, the kind of, the agile, flexible SMEs who are, kind of doing things differently, the startups coming into the marketplace to display some of these, big organisations who, unfortunately no longer relevant. Their models.
Well, it's to keep them on the toes a little bit, isn't
Absolutely,
it? Because if you're not being challenged, then you'll just plod on quite nicely, won't you? And as we've seen from many examples, that isn't going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need disruptors because, unfortunately, some organisations can get a bit too powerful. They can get a monopoly. So who's kind of got their sight on them and is going to disrupt the way they operate? We need that.
I think it's good in general for industries because it pushes that industry forward. If you're constantly having to disrupt and innovate and look at better ways of doing whatever it is that you do, that's good for the whole industry. It's good for the consumer. It's constantly making things better or more efficient, or adding extra value for the consumer. So I think it's good anyway. Just to push an industry forward.
At the end of the day, if people don't disrupt, if they don't think differently about it, then we just won't move forward, will we? The reason we're at where we're at, and we've been through the industrial revolution. We're in now 4.0, and the fact that we fly around the world on aeroplanes and stuff like that is because people were disrupting. They were thinking differently, and they were advancing forward.
And I think that's a really good point because one of the opportunities that we've got is it's tech for good, isn't it? That we've got a real opportunity to use technology to drive to solve some of the problems that we've got on the planet. Sustainability, and we've got a whole range of issues around around mental health. That is very very much in the press at the moment. The way we're living, the way capitalism's working isn't delivering for people. So, and one of my beliefs is that technology and digital tech specifically is part of that solution. So, let's harness it for good.
It could be a golden era, really, because it's certainly more accessible probably than it's ever been before. If you go back, we talked about going back 10 years, but at that point in time, it really was almost the mysterious art, wasn't it, really? Whereas I think there's still an element of that and that fear factor of understanding it and what have you, but it's certainly more accessible. And what it brings is that agility, isn't it? You can move much faster with digital, whereas, talking about some of the organisations that, banks, for example, they've had this sort of, the sort of branch network, which has just gone totally out of fashion, isn't it? And you're lumbered with this sort of asset, as it were, but is holding you.
And they're forced to adapt. Now, luckily, they're in a position. You take somebody like Barclays or similar big high street brand. They're in a position where they can adapt. They've got the money, they've got the infrastructure, they've got the people, and so they should, because otherwise they won't they won't be there. Because
and quite often they're focusing their efforts on supporting digital adoption. Aren't they?
Well, I mean, and because they know that's what their customers are going to need to do, and really any business, no matter what industry you're in, you need to be thinking in that way. Your customers are in that world, and therefore you have to be in that world if they're going to remain your customers.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if some of the bad press that we see around sort of digital is actually also having an effect on whether people want to adopt it. I mean, you talk about technology for good, but obviously, in the press, we're seeing a lot of negative things around the use of social media. There was the whole thing with Cambridge Analytica. There's also kind of a lot of almost like tech horror stories that exist. And I wonder if maybe on the business level, sort of people are starting to think, do I want my data up there? Do I want that? If there's maybe kind of a fear of that as well.
It's not news if it goes well, though, is it? You I suppose the press follow the bad news stories, really.
But I mean, all the more reason to have a good understanding of this stuff. So yeah, I mean, we're talking very rosy about like digital and it's this wonderful, glorious world. But obviously, it's got its downsides like anything else, and it can be abused and it can be misused. But you having knowledge of how that can happen is going to help you protect yourself. So cybersecurity is a good example of that, but how you use the social media, how an algorithm works, what does AI actually mean, and how does that actually link to my business? Having these little bits of knowledge, you don't have to be experts on it, but if you've got a bit of insight on it, then you're going to know how to best approach it.
And I think that there is a dark side to the web. There's a dark side to digital technology. And that point around protection, cybersecurity, all those sort of things, becomes ever more important, especially when, the world is going to run off infrastructure that's supported by digital tech, and so it's going to be a digital infrastructure, a digital way of living, almost. So we need to protect about that. Again, that. I'm kind of always the optimist, looking on the positive side of things, but that opens up a whole raft of opportunity, because we need solutions to those problems. We need, solutions to make things more robust in terms of security.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think people should be put off the idea of using digital just because it can also be used sort of for negative things. I mean, it's the equivalent of saying I don't want to live in a house because I might get burgled. It can sort of be used in a negative way, but it's a tool at the end of the day. And if you take a hammer, for example, in the right hands it's a tool. For someone else it may be a weapon. It's not to do with the hammer, it's to do with who's holding it and how they're using it. So I don't think it's digital itself that we should be afraid of. I think we should, as you say, we should learn and understand how it's used and learn how to protect ourselves.
Yeah, and there's programs that are out there. So coming back to Digital Catalyst, there are these programs exist. They're there to help businesses and kind of condense everything we've just been talking about into something that's tailored to them and say, look, okay, where are you at? Where do you want to be? How can we help you? Here's what's available. Here's what's out there. Here's what you need to know. And I mean, and that's it's free. It's a win, and anybody should be getting on board with this.
Real experts going in and available for a period, for a short period of time with a completely free offer, which and we'll sort of teach some techniques that will be able to be used for thereafter, really. So things like problem solving and developing ideas and what have you. Once they've been through it, that will be an asset they'll be able to use again and again.
Yeah.
And I think just to point on, the program's free, but to be honest, half the applications that will support companies to use are cheap as chips, aren't they? I mean, they're literally taking what would have been 3 people in a finance department and distilling it to maybe 20 quid a month, or what you would be paying for an HR manager, maybe £5 a month. It's 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 really, really cost effective.
Yeah. And I think, and across just to touch upon where we're talking about here, so we're talking the 4 regions of the Humber, essentially.
Yes, that's
on
it.
Humber
Yeah,
banks,
yeah. So he's riding whole northeast Lincolnshire and North Lincolnshire.
I was pointing at you there because I couldn't remember what the 4 were, and I was like, sorry, if I look at him long enough, he'll
I was feeling the pressure there. I was like,
yeah, there's a bit of bead of sweat coming up there. But I mean, for those that are watching, hopefully outside of the Humber region, I mean, these initiatives are going around. I mean, these things are coming out all the time because I mean, pretty much all authorities are looking at digital capabilities. Is fair to say.
So Cumbria's on our rollout map.
Stay tuned, Cumbria.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Wink, wink.
Yeah.
But I mean, but the wider point is, I mean, even if it's not the local authorities, I mean, like we talked about Barclays doing the Eagle Labs, like all institutions, authorities, businesses, public business, they're pretty much all throwing something out there, and you should try and embrace it if you look.
Absolutely. I mean, just a call out. So, but most areas, as you say, have options, solutions or programs within their areas. So for any businesses looking, no matter where you are up and down the country, go to your local growth hub, because your local growth hub will be able to tell you what's available in your area.
There's normally an education piece as well. So alongside the digital catalyst, there'll be a schedule of digital technology events. Yeah. So ranging from an overview of what's out there and educating businesses on what's available to them, but before then going into more detail on various different topics. So some of the things we've discussed today already: Internet of Things, cybersecurity, CRM, accounting, online accounting software, etc., etc. So that will help as well in terms of understanding a bit more specifically about particular areas.
Yeah, and probably opening your doors a little bit and embracing what's in your own community as well. I mean, we've talked about startups. I mean, we're coming from an incubator here essentially, which is full of digital businesses. Who would love to be with an established business and do something with them, or partner up, or come up with a new solution or whatever. So it's not even just a case of having it in-house. If you reach out, partner up, embrace what's around you, there's people that are doing wonderful stuff that you could be leveraging.
I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to looking to work with some as well, and to start showcasing some of the things they've been doing. Things like legal practices that have sort of generated an online business that they've really sort of transformed themselves really. And some really sort of high growth, interesting businesses, or businesses that have had a boost from adopting digital, and how they've managed to move themselves forward. So really excited about it.
I mean, the key is just don't ring fence yourself. Essentially, be open to change, be open to embracing things, and you'll have opportunity.
Yeah, and I think look around, your local area and see what's there, because I mean, no matter where you are, there's a good chance that there's things going on in your city. There's digital businesses, there's people doing new things, and sort of keep an eye out for those things and embrace them.
Yeah. Gents, this has been really good, but I'm aware that we're just talking on for ages, and so sorry for people watching it, but it's interesting, and you could talk about this stuff forever, really. And I mean, there's 100,000 topics that you could talk about in just on around the terms of digital. But for people in the Humber region that are looking at the Digital Catalyst program, what's the next steps? What do they need to be doing? I know it's not, the promotion isn't fully out there yet, but is there something they can be doing now to kind of be getting registering interest or getting involved?
Yeah, so there is through the Humber Business Growth Hub, there's an area around ICT for growth. Digital Catalyst can be found in there, so interest can be registered in there. So it's open to really any size of any small to medium sized enterprise, which means less than 250 employees. But really, it's probably more geared towards those with more than 5 employees. Probably upwards from there. Yeah. So that's where they can get on board. But we've got a couple of launch events coming very soon. So we're delighted to be running a launch at the Aura Innovation Centre. So one of the first big events to be run there on the 25th of March. And then south of the river, we will be running a launch at Forest Pines Hotel on the 29th of April in the afternoon. So really excited about those. So, I mean, it's in driving distance. You should just come down and take a look, right? And just check out what we're talking about. Because, absolutely, I mean, the likelihood is it's going to make some form of link to you. And you can hear us talk some more. And you can hear us talk a little bit more, yeah. Okay, guys, look, thanks very much. Thanks very much for this discussion. It's been really, really interesting. And we look forward to the programme rolling out. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you. Cheers.